morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of University of Engineering and Management, Kolkata, I would like to welcome all of you on the second day of International Conference UEMGreen 2021. So let's start our day with a small quote by Zig Ziglar. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Now we will be starting our day with the valuable speech of our keynote speaker of the day, Professor Katina Michael. I profusely elated to take an opportunity to introduce her. She is currently Professor of Arizona State University. She is formerly the long-standing IEEE Technology and Society magazine editor-in-chief and presently an IEEE Consumer Electronics magazine senior editor. Since 2008, she has been a board member of the Australian Privacy Foundation and formerly the vice chair. In 2017, she was awarded the prestigious Brian O'Connell Award for Distinguished Service to the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology. Now I urge Professor Katina Michael to illuminate us with her precious speech. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much to the organisers of UEMGreen, and a pleasure to be with all of you and to be presenting to you. Thank you for the opening remarks, for all the people behind the logistics and the organisation of this fine conference in India. I know you're broadcasting live, and I welcome everyone virtually online. Can everyone see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here we go. An adventure on the concept of tagging everything. Think about this, tagging everything, everything. I want you to look around your room where you are currently situated. Imagine placing an electronic tag on the curtains, on the wall behind you, on the vase, on your chair, on your eyeglasses, on your clothing, on the light fixture, on the door entry, on everything. Everything around you and on you. And now look at the picture I have at the top of my presentation slide. The lights are glowing on and off. We can see action, we can see life and nighttime based on this sensing of the earth around us. So tagging everything. What are the positive and negative social and environmental impacts? And that's really what we're thinking about in the College of Global Futures, where we have the Global Futures Laboratory, and we're starting to look at, in the Institute for the Future of Innovation in Society, we're starting to look about how do we globally sense things? How do we look down and see what's going on all around us? How do we know what's going on? How can we address problems in the world by sensing the world and understanding the world intimately? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because as we gain more information and we have more understanding, or at least more data, we start to then conceive, how can we use that data to help us address the challenges that countries are facing today on mass scale, internationally, as a globe, as a united humanity. And so let's begin with my abstract plainly. And I talk in my abstract about the tagging of people, of animals and things, which has allowed us to perform this data collection at the individual unit level. I'm talking about living things and non-living things, those things that breathe like we do and animals breathe, and the things that don't breathe, like a blackboard or a whiteboard or a door in a room. And now consider these nodes in a network. It's your last mile device. When I tag something, it's the last mile, right to the edge, beyond the edge, it's on me. I can tag a piece of clothing or a ring or something that I'm wearing. And that's really the last bit of the network node. For those people who have implantable devices, the node is within them. We often talk about users as being that final node in a network. Now think about implants that go inside the body, or a tag that goes inside the ear of an animal to identify it uniquely. And so we have all these edge devices like mobile phones, and we have tablets, and we have other kinds of devices, and they're at the edge. They allow us to access and connect to the cloud. Now, imagine as we're dynamically walking around and we're tracking and monitoring things. I may be carrying a phone with sensors. This is a sensor platform. If you think about it, I may also be a sensor myself. I could be carrying many sensors on me. Now, think about these devices emanating data, ones and zeros, coming from everywhere and going onto the cloud. And then collectively, we are trying to make sense of this big data. So the edge devices are those that interface with us. They could interface with the environment. They could interface between machines, but they can also pose some positive and negative social and environmental impacts. On the positive side, we can say that we are potentially saving on electricity when we know that there is no human being within a room. We can switch off the lights. But also, this is giving breath to an issue to do with surveillance, perhaps, and monitoring. If I know that Katina is in this room, then I know she is not at home or not at work. So when we look at the position of collective awareness, the question is, what is the positive side of collecting all this data? It's knowing more about ourselves. It's knowing more about the world around us. The better we know things around us, the better we might be able to preserve and conserve and sustain. And so this is what this talk is going to be mainly. What can we do with the data that we're collecting? How can we place it on the cloud for collective awareness? Now, on the flip side of this positive use, we also have this notion of überveillance, this intrusive surveillance that can penetrate one's perceived freedom and autonomy beyond the harm that might come from attaching technology to the body. And so while I want this visibility, I may be tempted to use the visibility for surveillance, and this can have the action of curbing one's freedom or autonomy. Now, large manufacturers have discovered that identifying items with RFID tags and transponders are probably prohibitive at the unit level. We used to think we could place a tag on a can of Coke. And as time went on, we realized we don't really need to place a tag on a can of Coke. We can place it on a carton that goes on a pallet and is distributed from the distribution point right to the retailer or the wholesaler, depending on who it is that is the middle person. And so why are we collecting, and at what level are we collecting, and what can we do with that is a very good question. Might we be able at that unit level to create less e-waste, or by tagging everything, are we prohibitively creating more e-waste? So the more I produce IoT devices, the more they end up on dumping grounds in lesser developed nations, and the more we have to think about our strategy for collecting this data. So if I want to sense, I have to collect, but if I collect, I may be generating more e-waste, and if I generate more e-waste, where does that end up? So we're stuck in this conundrum. Is there a potential for recycling is a good question, especially if these devices are helping us to recycle. So what might be the fallout of sending autonomous systems out to crowdsource aspects of the world through Autobots in urban centers or the wild? Now, initially I said to you, what if people were sensing? What if I was carrying these devices and walking around, and as I was being a citizen scientist, I was collecting information about temperature, I was taking photographs. If I placed my device on my shoulder, I could have video analytics happening. I could be looking at different things around me that were not right or were right. I could be using different sensors like speed and distance and time calculations. I could use GIS to navigate to the shortest path. I could use GPS, a global positioning system sensor. I could do a lot of things, but what is the outcome of this autonomous collection, where I would say in the future, our cars are going to become autonomous data collection systems. Our buses, anything that moves, our drones, our airplanes, and just collect, sense, collect. And if we have this to the minute kind of data coming from lampposts or light posts or anything in fixtures, perhaps this sharing between dynamic tracking bots and those things that are fixed to a wall, we may be able to calibrate this different sensing information and know what is going on. I may set up camera traps in the wild to look at what is going on with the extinction of animals potentially, or how animals behave in the wild and how I can preserve a particular area. And at the same time, we have benefits. As I talk about extinction, wonderful initiatives like wildbook.org and questagame.com are initiatives that entrepreneurs have begun so that they are able to conserve and preserve, to ensure that our animal species are exciting to us and stay with us into the longer term. So this presentation shows the pros and cons of tagging everything around us and the ensuing social and environmental impacts. And I hope you're in for a treat. Before we move on, I do want to stay on some definitions. It'll make the rest of the presentation a little bit more conducive to understanding. So what is AI? AI is being spoken about in the tagging and tracking of things and the tracing of things. It's a branch of computer science dealing with the simulation of intelligence and intelligent behavior in computers. It may imitate human behavior. And so potentially I'm comparing two photographs and seeing if they're the same animal species or of the same type, or in fact, whether it's exactly the same animal that has been sighted in two different locations. Our machine learning is a subset of AI and provides systems with the ability to automatically learn and improve from experience without explicitly being programmed. This is sometimes known as unsupervised learning. And machine learning focuses on the development of computer programs that can access data and use it to learn for themselves. So I show a machine or a image sensor 100 different photographs, and it can corroborate the photographs in order. It can tell me about the location. It can tell me whether it's the same animal in that scene. It can tell me what type of animal it is, because it's constantly learning from the data that we're feeding the machine learning algorithm. Big data, on the other hand, takes all of this data, and the more data we feed the machine, the more we can make sense of the things around us. Potentially, big data can be defined as extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations. What if I said to you, big data could be used to show whether there has been a disruption in the food chain of a particular species in a particular location? And what we are seeing perhaps is the decay of the animal or fur that's being removed from the animal due to disease in the space. For example, the Australian koalas that have undergone massive disruption in the last 3 to 4 years. Imagine we could watch the koalas out in the wild and see them early in the disease onset and respond with earlier interventions than allowing a species to die out or be injured. Crowdsourcing, for that matter, is the practice of obtaining information or input into a task or project by enlisting the services of a large number of people, and they could be paid or unpaid. I may crowdsource by asking people, hey, you live in this area, you're near the koalas, go out and take photographs of the koalas every time you see them. Crowdsource, come together, start to pool your resources together. And this is really citizen scientists out in the field, potentially citizen scientists, but they could be employees, they could be government agency, organizations, and other things. The Open Data Institute equips and connects and inspires people around the world to innovate with data. Please give us your data, open it up, don't put it behind a paywall, allow us to see it. And the data can take any form. It could take the form of a still shot, it could take the form of a video, it could take the form of text or audio. Perhaps I want to go into a desert space and record the sounds of the cicadas and store them for archival purposes and for the future. Does it mean that we will have these cicadas with us in 100 years' time? How can we continue to pull our information together and our data together? And the ODI talks about this open data initiative. And by breaking data open, what we are doing is providing people access to the data so that somebody in another country or a group of students in a particular university or institute can use the data and harvest it in a way that is helping them to gain educational awareness. We are not harvesting to sell or corrupting in terms of manipulating others. What we are doing is looking at the open data and making sense of it from an educational context. The planetary skin. is a joint initiative that occurred many years ago between organizations like NASA and IBM and so forth, and was a global non-profit research and development organization that aimed to improve the lives of millions of people around the world. If I can think of the planet as having a skin around it, I can sense that planet and I can figure out areas that perhaps were subject to deforestation, and I can interject with interventions. This is something that we're trying to achieve under our provost, assistant provost, Peter Schlosser at the College of Global Futures, where we're trying to understand how can we address complex problems. And this is using adaptive systems. So we're adapting and changing by the minute, but at what level of interval are you capturing this data to sense the planetary skin around us? And finally, how do we address these things? Well, we've got to address them together through collective awareness and collective action. These are the platforms for sustainability and social innovation. There are many pioneers in this space, including Professor Jeremy Pitt, and who talks about if we do this together, we can create awareness, and what can come out of this is an emerging sustainability. And that's what we're all looking for. How can we sustain the earth that we live in? How can we sustain the population growth? How can we sustain enough food security? How can we address depletion of our resources? They're all limited resources, whether they're animals, whether they're minerals in the ground, or even clean drinking water. This is all about sensing the environment. And so the mega cities, particularly in corridors of India and China, have mega problems. At the same time, they have mega opportunities. But the first thing we need to do is to stress the environment and the infrastructure. We have to look at mobility and migration patterns within a nation, power consumption issues and energy issues. Some people don't have access to energy to cook their food. Some people do not have electricity. How do we develop our nations and innovate at the same time? I know India is going through the local to global summit initiatives, trying to figure out how to innovate in their own nation to propel the nation forward and give it hope greater than it has today. But this all takes coordination and governance. It takes financing, backing from international organizations. And at the same time, what we are dealing with are these natural disasters and human-made disasters. So how can we lessen air pollution? How can we reduce carbon footprints? How can we manage our traffic and congestion better? How can we address climate issues? And then the energy sector with water, electricity, of course, transportation and healthcare. These are the most important pieces of infrastructure that we find are interdependent. And so how can better visibility of the world around us? And here I show you a map. You're all familiar with Google Earth. That's how I want you to envisage the world, how we can address these problems together. Are we going to have open data sets that allow us to look at the globe in this way and to look at areas of needs and challenges that we need to overcome together? What kinds of layers of information will we introduce onto this planetary skin? Population figures, density figures, arable land, land use patterns. What else? Where the natural disasters are occurring, why they may be occurring, underlying sediment information, ocean data, fisheries data, access to food data, wage information, poverty cycles. These are the things at the mega scale that we should be looking down to, be able to turn a globe through these new AI potential solutions and say, what if I did this? What if this scenario happened? What if I introduced this into this area? What if I lessened the effect of this? And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about complex adaptive systems. But we can only adapt if we are aware and we know. And we only know when we have more data. And of course, one of the things that is difficult to actually map onto this global view is culture. And culture pervades every nation, and culture is different everywhere. Culture can be different even within one nation at the community level. And so we have to understand, to address these mega concerns, we're talking about local communities, and each community functions in a different way. If I can sense what is occurring, how may I be able to offer beneficial information to that community to help it coordinate better and help it help out itself. So here's a short video. It'll give you a break from me talking. I'm not going to show all of it, but I do want to expose you to some of the concepts.
Since the mists of time, the Earth has changed, evolved. This movement spans millions of years. Today, the human species is faced with the biggest challenges of its evolution. More than 6 billion human beings, a transformed Earth, climate imbalances that seem to be growing, animal species disappearing. Throughout the centuries, humankind has not only modified the Earth, it has studied, surveyed, and examined the planet. Today, satellites enable us to gain a fresh look at the Earth. This capability, coupled with the revolution in computer technologies, makes it possible to acquire and manage vast amounts of data. This array of scientific information gathered on the ground by balloons at high altitude, deep in the seas or at the surface of oceans, or from space, provides our planet's health indicators. The ambition of the GMES program is not only to ensure the compatibility of these data sets, but also to couple them with socio-economic information collected in the field. This synergy will enable humankind to cope with the major issues of our times: quality of life and environmental stress, earth and ocean monitoring, as well as response to emergencies and humanitarian crises. This work is starting to bear fruit. Already the first GMES services are pre-operational and are provided to a wide range of users, institutional, private, and even individual citizens. Here are a few illustrations of the benefits of the first GMES services. In Europe, many rivers are prone to diffuse pollution, resulting from the use of fertilizers and phytosanitary products in agriculture. This is the case in the transnational Sarre-Moselle catchment.
The GMES project has enabled the International Commission for the Protection of the Sarre and Moselle rivers to create a common database for evaluating diffuse pollution from nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as from pesticides. This approach harmonized over 3 countries, France, Luxembourg and Germany, is an essential milestone for evaluating pollution, particularly in relation to the Water Framework Directive.
So friends, what we are doing with this information is at a local scale. In this instance, in this first of 3 case studies in this video, is to look at a catchment management area and to ensure that we don't have a polluted river system. Of course, we need to sense different things about the environment: water quality, potential spillage of waste into that river system, potentially the heavy industry that may be bordering this river system that is quite long and crosses 3 countries. And so we work together to better manage the catchment. And so we can only do that if we have visibility. And that's what this tagging at that level gives us. But what kind of sensors? Who has that information? What kind of database does it reside in? Is the database open? Are there penalties for misuse, etc., etc.? Who governs this structure? And increasingly what we have is more and more visibility from satellite data. We even have them from low orbiting satellites and increasingly other different kinds of systems that are being launched into space at the moment, giving us this incredible visibility at this unique level of detail. Here we could even see number plate signs, so we can sense but see what is going on if we wish to. So think about a globe that has a global skin. There's a problem spot there. I zoom into the area, I get greater visibility beyond what you see on Google Street View. And then I can look at the environment and I can make a judgment, I can make a decision, I can impact a strategic plan, I can look at the operational goals that we have and seek to fulfill them. We can also do this, as we've seen by Google, by wearing different kinds of devices, in this case, a Google tracker device that gives me visibility and takes images and snapshots as I walk around. There was the Google Gondola tracker device. There was the one that I wear on my backpack. There's the Google Snowmobile that I can actually go into the snow on the top left. And even I can use normal skis to go through places where cars cannot go to. And so I not only have the view from the heavens, so to speak, from the global positioning system, I also have the street view around me. And I also have the person view coming out of my point of view. Excuse me. The data this gives us is a completely different visibility from the top to what I see to what is around me. And here's another video potentially of what's possible.
The sun rises on 825 miles of Florida coastline, a kaleidoscope of personality. The quest? Serve up Florida's beaches to the world. The team, Visit Florida, the Trekkers, and one very famous camera, Google's Street View in Trekker mode. 15 lenses, a modem, and GPS. 40 pounds on a backpack. Day 1, former Marine, Chris Officer.
Here we are, Perdido Key, Florida-Alabama state line, and these are our first steps.
He dodges showers, then the beating sun, and happy sunbathers. Next up, Greg Matthews, IT specialist. He's ready to get the ball rolling, or rather, snapping.
What do you think is the biggest challenge?
The human factor, interacting with people and trying to not talk to every single person.
Are you a part of the researching group?
Well, I'm contracted through Visit Florida to carry this thing around.
And this is a good job.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Did you get a picture?
No, not yet. Oh yeah, I got to do that.
Welcome to Florida right there.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Each mile trekked averages about 900 panos, or digital images. Those pictures go to Google headquarters to be added to their Street View feature.
That's what we're looking for, is the perfect 360-degree experience that allows a visitor to rehearse what their real Florida beach experience.
So we can see we have mechanisms by which to take images, and in this instance, they were contracted employees by Florida state government using the Google devices. But in fact, this is a form of crowdsourcing. So I get enough people trekking, I can sense the environment around me. The question is, who has the right to do that? Whether a public space is really public, or perhaps it can be private in the context. In the upper right, we have an experiment using a GoPro device placed on a homeless person so that they could measure the temperature of the exposure of the individual who was homeless. Is this appropriate is a question. We have Google Glass as well. We have different kinds of devices on the market that could be constantly recording as we're going around. We even have this soft contact lens that has a sensor and a chip and antenna that potentially could be us having a clear visibility on our contact lens while the contact lens is either streaming internet or recording. All of these things are possible in the future as the sensors go from global to street view to on us and in us. It could even be sensing what is occurring to my biological system in terms of a heartbeat, a pulse rate, and other vital signs and physical characteristics. So we can see we have the ability to be visible, but at what level should we be thinking about as appropriate? And of course, the context is everything. In this case, we have an automated bot at the bottom. You can see the K5 Nightscope bot that is a security guard going around a security car park, a secured car park. And on the top, you have this dual security device, which is a roaming drone that's taking video as it's corroborating machine to machine with the K5 Nightscope bot that's going around. Companies like Microsoft had trialed these at about 2017 timeframe. So you have surveillance from the top, surveillance from the street view, and potentially surveillance from on top of us. And of course, we now have also entered private dwellings with thermostats and businesses. We think that we have greater knowledge by the amount of requirement on a thermostat. We know what is going on with smart meters, for example. We know what is going on with internal systems like drop cams. We not only can sense how much energy consumption there is. For example, if there are people that require cooling systems in hot areas, and so if the cooling is lowered, we know that there is a particular demand for air conditioning. If it's higher, we know that that area requires a lot more heat. In winter, for example, it's snowing outside. But what used to be a smoke and carbon monoxide alarm has changed. It is no longer just a smoke and carbon monoxide alarm that has a battery in it. It is now an Internet of Things device, and those Internet of Things are starting to communicate with one another. I may also have a visual image using a recording device when I'm not at home, or potentially when I'm protecting assets in the workplace. And I can take the drop cam recording and post it to the cloud. Again, our video analytics is going to become so mature, and AI systems and algorithms so mature that they're going to be able to scroll through video analytics and look at behavioral patterns between people and other living things, and between people and machines, things that they pick up and interact with, like their tablet devices or their photocopiers or whatever there is in the vicinity. But we have now a visual recording. Now, it's all good and well to talk about this big data, to talk about collective awareness, but this mechanism and process that I'm referring to takes energy. It takes storage devices. They're not unlimited. Even if our Amazon Web Services and other cloud computing services in the world want to depict to us that, there is no limit. The truth is there is. And it costs too much to delete. It costs too much to go back and say, I want this recording, I don't want this recording. So currently we're recording everything and we're putting it to the cloud. Individuals take so many images and personal photographs every year. Imagine this at a business organizational level and a government agency level and a safety level like law enforcement organizations. There is a limitation. There is a cost to the collection of this data. And this is where we have to be able to balance the pros and cons. And so again, back to that original image, the Internet of Things, being able to trigger an IP address, being able to locate it using its longitude and latitude coordinates, being able to send it information and receive updates from it, being able to update a price on the IoT device, or sense the temperature of a collection of devices. This area of the world is heating up. Could there be an earthquake that's looming? Could there be lava streaming out of a particular once dormant volcano? What is the air quality like? Are we having an eruption, for example, of a volcano? What are the potentialities for the human hazards and also natural hazards? We can do that with IoT, but at the same time, we are generating more devices out on the field. And who has control of these devices is a very important question. Now, the notion of automatic identification has been around for more than 100 years. But the question is, how did this technology mature? Around the late 1990s, there was this Auto ID Labs initiative heralded through MIT and Cambridge and St. Gallen's, KAIST and Fudan and the University of Adelaide and Keio. And they came together to talk about the potentiality of being able to do the things that I'm talking to you about. How could they advance the Internet of Things concept that actually came out of a Procter & Gamble organization? How could they look at global commerce, global interactions? And this is when the open data movement also came almost at the same time. The Internet of Everything. Nothing should be private. We should unlock data, geographic information systems, data and raster images that we used to pay for in the hundreds of thousands of dollars as satellites went up into the skies to actually take images at very high resolutions of data. And this became open. I was working in the industry when this data was private and would cost us $100,000 per tile as we wish to zoom in to look at the potential for telecommunications networks. And now this data is free in countries like Afghanistan. You don't have to knock on the door of a supplier to say, can I have access to the data? It's open. I can access it. And many people are saying the open data movement is the end of starving children in Africa, potentially. If I know what I can do with this big data. It's the end of criminality. I can catch a criminal before they perform a criminal act. This is the end of corruption because everything's transparent. There's nowhere to hide, and there are sensors sensing everywhere, transactions. And so we have the Open Government Data Initiative. We have crowdsourcing platforms that allow communities to coordinate themselves. We have a collective awareness movement that says, if I have more energy, I can give my extra capacity to my neighbor down the road. I want to share energy towards sustainability. I want everyone to have energy and be warm during winter. I want everyone to have electricity in my neighborhood. I can give if I have extra, and this has led to the notions of smart grids, smart homes, smart meters, smart cars, smartphones, and smart people interacting. Now, the question is, what might be wrong with such a model? And the answer to that is, I know who you are, I know where you live, I know what your affordability is like, I know what condition you're in because I know what energy you draw from. The people who can't afford usually turn off or don't have heating systems in their home, or cooling systems for that matter. But it's all about redistribution, and redistribution and sharing is great. It's what came out of Elinor Ostrom's resource pooling and collective action and collective awareness studies. And here's an example of a smart meter customer where we could monitor our own energy use, and we could look at it between months and between years, and we could say this time I can afford it, I can share. And we're going into these sophisticated platforms, but the question is, will it help us adapt our behavior? We've got global crisis data maps. This is the CrisisNet, the Ushahidi network, for example, down the bottom left, you can see that, CrowdMap, Swift River, CrisisNet, Ping, BRIC, and all of this public beta kind of open access and open data information to help us know how we can come together to sense the world around us. As I mentioned before, the Planetary Skin Institute that looks at land, water, food, energy, and the climate nexus. This is no longer a collaboration that's operational, but I take great inspiration for what they attempted to do. Basically, they tried to overcome resource scarcity. And here's a short video from that era of about 7-8 years ago.
Planetary Skin Institute. Sense, predict, act. 3 simple steps to address complex global challenges. The major challenges arising from climate change impact every aspect of our lives on our planet. Our societies, economies, and the environment are already bearing the impacts, and there's more and more dramatic to come. We'll see those impacts materializing at every level, from local to global, on land, at sea, and in developing and developed countries. As they try to address multiple and intertwined problems such as water scarcity, food security, rainforest cover and biodiversity loss, the ever-growing demand for energy and its conservation, people around the world make billions of decisions, large and small, every day. But whether they're in the public or private sector, or simply making choices about their local community, all these people share a common problem. They're flying blind because they only have partial information. It comes down to a simple observation. We can't manage what we can't measure. Compounding this challenge is the vast amount of data that's continuously gathered but held in isolated silos. The Planetary Skin R&D program offers a new unifying approach to addressing these major challenges. Planetary Skin creates a distributed nervous system, integrating information from networked sensors on the ground, at sea, in the air, and in space, from machines, and of course from people. It pulls all that information into an open and shared decision space, giving people the information they need, how and when they need it. Researchers will be able to immerse themselves in the decision space. Here, they can carry out all their day-to-day carbon monitoring tasks. This will enable the risk scoring needed to unlock large-scale public and private finance.
So friends, you get the idea here. If we can't see and we lack visibility, we don't know, and we can't make decisions. Of course, this kind of mindset spurred on many decision systems laboratories across the world, with multiple screens in these laboratories sensing different indicators, because initially we had this siloed view of the world, the economics, the political, the cultural, the religious, the socio-demographics, etc., etc. We did not bring them together. We did not recognize that systems are interdependent, that even natural systems rely on each other to actually work. Human-made systems interact on the earth, and they interact with the earth's resources. And this is what we're trying to capture through AI. Now, hold that thought for a moment, because we are attempting now to tag everything, tag livestock, as we can see here, to curb disease. We are tagging wildlife. In this instance, you can see a GPS collar on the polar bear in the Arctic. Here we have wildbook.org, an incredible initiative out of the United States that is doing a lot of work in Africa, for example, to reduce extinction levels of different wildlife. And they try to track individual animals, they collect biological samples, they engage citizen scientists, everyday people living in communities, they build collaborative networks and distributed research networks for global species sustainability. They develop new animal biometric solutions and observatories and pattern matching for photos, and they collect behavioral and/or social data for a wildlife study population. Their heart is in the right space. We have games that have gamified citizen science and are saying, instead of sitting there playing video games, kids, go outside and start sensing the information, start taking photographs, children, and help us out so that we can actually know more about the level of extinction, and we can save species on planet Earth. And you can see on this game, the citizen scientists have almost 1 million sightings, almost 2 million verified identifications, and 18,000 plus expert levels have been gained. And what are they looking at? Beetles, butterflies, fish in the sea, monkeys that they see, antelopes, and so forth. Getting people actually aware that they live in a physical space around them that requires preservation. Let's look at what else is happening, tagging unique wildlife very quickly here.
Today we're inserting transmitters, surgically inserting transmitters with the veterinarians from the Brookfield Zoo. We did largemouth bass, walleye, and muskie.
This is a largemouth bass, and it's currently in an anesthetic bath. So what we're looking for is opercular movement. So that's the movement of these portions of the fish's body that move water over the gills.
All right, largemouth bass, length 444, weight 1,500.
The fish is now laying on its back. So the way that we're able to keep the fish under anesthesia and provide it oxygen is by running water over its gills. Dr. Johnson is removing just a handful of scales so that we can make an incision into the fish's skin, just large enough to place the transmitter into the coelomic cavity. So I'm just rinsing off the transmitter. Should somebody catch this fish or find this transmitter, it actually says, please call, this is the Cook County Forest Preserve Transmitter Conservation Project.
So what we can see here is that we are placing transponders even in wildlife and salmon to look at migration patterns. We're putting microchips in Brazilian trees to understand the trees better. We're placing microchips in plants to identify them easier. We are looking at traceability in food systems from farms right through to the dinner table. We are thinking about sustainability and even sticking a chip in every person for reusability, reprogrammability, and recycling. So each tag should be recycled and is reusable, and they're thinking about billions of tags, as is noted here in a 2004 peer-reviewed article. And the future visions are about chip implants and tagging everything. for the purposes of biomimetics and biotechnology, of sustainability, as you can see here, highlighted in the yellow. But I want to leave you with this thought. In our plight, to know everything, to know the who, the where, and what condition, and the point of view, to have an image of something and to run these images through machine learning algorithms and to create big databases that are interconnecting so that we can better sense the world around us. We can have evidence on demand. We can have validation of our decisions. We can minimize the risk in the hope of better care and convenience and control, in the hope of better efficiencies and effectiveness and resource optimization. The question, friends, is whether we've gone too far. And in our hope to sense, are we going down the wrong path in sensing? And is there a better way than relying on technology? Do humans have a role in this, after all, in order to have positive social impacts and positive environmental impacts around them? Do we need humans more engaged in citizen science, but not really sticking chips in salmon or in wildlife or in relying just on visual photography or imagery? What is the role of the human here? And so while I've painted this amazing Internet of Things picture of this notion of total visibility and total awareness and collective action and coordination, the question I want to leave you with is the human that vital element in this technological solution that needs to be considered? And going away from purely technological to socio-technical, and the notion of an ecosystem that's forming where we all have to play our part and not relegate responsibility to the machine, but to relegate responsibility to humans that care about the world around them and can impact. So I'm not saying we don't need technology. I think we need to think about what level of technology we need, what kinds of programming and software solutions we need, interacting with discrete data. It does not have to be continuous data, because we will run out of systems in the world and storage devices in the world. We will place too much pressure on CPU processing, on visualization. The question is, what do we collect? How do we collect it? What do we leave alone and preserve in pure ways rather than interventions that perhaps go into animals and humans? And what is appropriate? But we have to have these discussions. I think the discussion of collective action to resharing and pooling resources together is important, particularly for the have-nots, and to lessen the digital divide. But my fear as a technologist is that we will go too far in trying to sense and miss the point. What level of detail do we need, and what information will we collect together and empower one another? With that, I offer question time if you have time, and thank you for listening so attentively.